Here's an interesting fact. The Jack Daniels honey, the cinnamon and green apple, they technically cannot be called whiskey because you can buy a barrel of Jack Daniels at the distillery for about $10,000. And if you buy a barrel, your name gets engraved on the wall of the Jack Daniels distillery.
Hi everyone, Swati and Vinayak from the Dram Club. And as you can see, we are going to be talking about Jack Daniels today. But before we get started, Vinayak, I have a question for you.
Okay.
What comes to your mind when you think of Jack Daniels?
Oh, Jack Daniels. So I started drinking whiskey with Jack Daniels.
Okay.
Or Jack Daniels is what got me hooked onto whiskey. Two reasons, or the main reason was 2009.
Okay.
I watched Scent of a Woman.
Al Pacino.
Al Pacino.
Okay.
And Al Pacino's character would always have Jack Daniels in the movie.
Okay.
When that character used to order for Jack Daniels, I thought, oh wow, this is a good whiskey.
Right.
But so I'll go to a neighborhood bar because that time I was living outside India, and I'll order for Jack Daniels. So that's my memory or first memory of Jack Daniels.
Okay.
So Swati, why don't you tell us your first memories or what comes to your mind when you think of Jack Daniels?
Actually, the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of Jack Daniels is JD and Coke.
Okay.
Those premixes.
Premixes?
Yeah. So I think it was 2016 when I had visited Thailand.
Okay.
And you have that 7-Eleven store. So we walked in to buy something, and that's where for the first time I saw a JD and Coke can.
And you had never had JD before?
I had never had JD before that.
Not bad.
So that was very interesting to me because I'd never seen anything like that in India before, right? It was a premix of the JD Old Number 7 and Coke. So that was my first sip of JD in any form or fashion. Of course, I had JD much later, I think even after starting Dram Club. I think my first JD neat was actually the Sinatra Select.
Wow, so you were spoiled.
Yes, so I was spoiled for choice. So yeah, for me, JD is very... I mean, I've had one end of the spectrum, which is JD and Coke, which is one of the most popular cocktails, and then I've had Sinatra Select neat.
Right, and who made you try the Sinatra Select? Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, you. So that's my association with Jack Daniels.
Great.
But of course, I've seen it in a lot of English movies and a lot of English American dramas and all of that. So I know of Jack Daniels as if I was living under a rock and I didn't know what it is. But
you never know, you might be living under a rock.
Yeah, but I never tried it. So yeah, that's that.
No, but that's what, it's such an iconic drink.
Yeah.
And not enough is known about it, right? Like we've seen it in the various content that they've created in the past. People think Jack Daniels is bourbon, or for that matter, even a Scotch whiskey. So,
I think that's the biggest misconception that people have, that it's a bourbon.
Yeah. So that's what this video is going to be all about. Jack Daniels for Dummies. We'll take you through every expression of Jack Daniels available in India and the history of Jack Daniels, and also what makes Jack Daniels so unique. It's American, it's almost a bourbon, but yet it's not a bourbon. So let's get started.
So as Vinayak mentioned, Jack Daniels is almost a bourbon, but not a bourbon. Well, Jack Daniels is a Tennessee whiskey. There is one step in the production process that separates it from what a bourbon is, which is called the Lincoln County process. Vinayak, would you like to tell us what the Lincoln County process is?
So the Lincoln County process, the process that sets apart a Tennessee whiskey from a bourbon, is nothing but a simple filtration process in which the whiskey goes through maple charcoal chips, adding to that mellow, sweeter flavor profile that Jack Daniels is renowned for. So Swati, now that we've established what sets a Tennessee whiskey apart from a bourbon whiskey, let's now explore what makes Jack Daniels special and its history and the founder. So Jack Daniels was born as Jasper Newton Daniel. Now Swati, imagine ordering Jasper and Coke. So his nickname was Jack. So Jack Daniels got irritated with his grandmother and ran away from home in 1864, and he was given refuge by a certain Reverend Dan Call. This is where he met an enslaved man, Nathan Nearest, who taught him whiskey making.
In 1866, Jack Daniel established the Jack Daniels distillery, and it was the first registered distillery in US with Jack Daniels as his master distiller. But later, he hired Uncle Nathan Nearest Green as the head distiller at the distillery.
Fast forward to 1904, the Jack Daniels Old Number 7 won first of its, guess how many gold medals? 7. But what a coincidence.
Yeah.
A whiskey named Old Number 7 wins 7 gold medals.
And here's an interesting fact. Nobody till date knows why the whiskey is called Old Number 7.
So while there are a lot of theories and myths floating around, no one ever got to know why it was called Old Number 7, because in 1906, Jack Daniels passed away. Now fast forward to 1947. While 1947 is an iconic year for all of us, all Indians at least, because that's the year India got independence. But in the history of Jack Daniels, that was a pivotal moment, because that's when legendary, iconic singer Frank Sinatra was introduced to Jack Daniels and forged an iconic lifelong friendship. And throughout his lifetime, Frank Sinatra was Jack Daniels' biggest brand ambassador and fan.
In fact, when Frank Sinatra passed away, he was buried with a bottle of Jack Daniels. That's how much he loved this whiskey.
And also here's something I find very intriguing about Jack Daniels. So Jack Daniels is made in Lynchburg County, which is, guess what? A dry county. So whiskey distillery, which is amongst the top selling whiskey brands in the world, being made in a dry state. Also, Swati, here's something very interesting about Jack Daniels. It's the only distillery in the world to have its own fire department. It has a dedicated 34-member team as a part of its fire department, which you think of with all the charcoal that they burn, right? That is required for the filtration. They need a fire department.
Yeah, that's why I was wondering, why do they need a fire department at the distillery?
So
Interesting. And I think with a lot of history and fun fact lessons, now it's time to deep dive into some of the expressions that are available in India. Of course, we have the Jack Daniels Old Number 7, which was the first expression that was launched by the distillery in 1866. Interestingly, from 1866 to 1988, there was only Old Number 7. In 1988, the distillery introduced Gentleman Jack. Gentleman Jack is essentially a premium, more mellow whiskey as compared to the Old Number 7. And what makes it more mellow and more smooth is the double charcoal filtration. So as we mentioned earlier, that the Lincoln County process, filtration happens after distillation through maple charcoal chips before barreling. For Gentleman Jack, there is another filtration that happens after the aging has been done before bottling. And this second filtration makes it a smoother and a mellower spirit compared to the Old Number 7.
Now the next whiskey that's part of the core expression is the Jack Daniels Single Barrel Select. It was first released in 1997. Bottled at a 47% ABV or 94% proof, Jack Daniels Single Barrel Select is a very unique Tennessee whiskey. And compared to its other siblings, it is bolder and flavorful.
And now, a little bit about the first Jack Daniels that I ever had, which was the Sinatra Select.
The brand that you are.
Yes. As the name suggests, the Sinatra Select was actually released to pay tribute to the legendary singer Frank Sinatra, because he was such a fan of this whiskey. What makes the Sinatra Select really special is that they carve out deep grooves into the staves of the barrel. What this does is increases the exposure of the spirit to the wood, as a result of which the whiskey tastes bolder and more intense, just like how Frank Sinatra would have loved it.
Or my way.
And in 2011, to make the whiskey space more exciting and to stay relevant with the younger drinking audience, Jack Daniels introduced their first ever flavored expression, JD Honey, which was then later followed by the Jack Daniels Green Apple and the Jack Daniels Cinnamon, which is also called Jack Daniels Fire.
Also, here's an interesting fact. The Jack Daniels Honey, the Cinnamon and Green Apple, they technically cannot be called whiskey because no additive can be added to whiskey, whether it's a Tennessee whiskey, bourbon or a Scotch whiskey. Hence, the names on these bottles would always be like JD Honey or JD Green Apple or JD Fire for that matter. And all three expressions are bottled at 35% ABV. And here's an interesting information or fact for all you whiskey collectors and investors. You can buy a barrel of Jack Daniels at the distillery for about $10,000. And if you buy a barrel, your name gets engraved on the wall of the Jack Daniels distillery. So with that, we come to the end of this video that's all about Jack Daniels and its history. Let us know in the comments below which of these expressions you would like us to review. And don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.